Fantastic. Thanks very much, everybody. Sorry that I couldn't be there in person. I guess you all know the reasons why. Although I've been listening to a lot of the presentations during the course of yesterday, and this virtual format seems to be working really well. So let's go with it. My name's Gary Connors. I'm from Oliver White. Some of you may recognize us, and I must say I've been really impressed with the quality of the presentation so far, and the deep level of understanding about what integrated business planning is exponentially different to what it was when I first started doing this 10 years ago. So I'm not here, folks, to tell you about integrated business planning. I'm going to take a different tack and maybe tell you about some of the failure modes that our clients see along the way. You may recognize some of them, and hopefully some of them will this presentation will help you avoid some of them. So let me first talk about integrated business planning. It's easy to sell integrated business planning, right? But it's much more difficult to manage the implementation and the change. When we meet clients, we often see them in a mode of firefighting, where things are not happening the way they should, surprises every day. They're not seeing the issues coming until it's too late. We see organizations where people are under a tremendous amount of stress, and power grabbing is a way we often describe organizations. Having knowledge gives you power. Sharing knowledge dilutes that power. So it's a really individualistic organization, and at best, oftentimes we see organizations that are functionally siloed. So I'm making decisions that's what's best for me and what's best for my function, rather than what's best for the organization. We see organizations with inconsistent processes and poor business performance. And when we offer them would you like to go to a world where you have routine and reliability and predictability, where everything happens the way it should every day, where knowledge is shared and decisions are made cross-functionally, where there's standard roles and processes in the organization and business performance improves. And of course they jump for it. Who wouldn't want to be working in a world like that compared to the firefighting and stress? Unfortunately, to make that jump happen requires an integrated approach across the business. It's not a supply chain project. It requires a cross-functional, integrated approach. It requires demonstrated leadership, and I would put that one first and foremost as one of the critical success factors of an IBP implementation. And the topic for today is it requires change management. Just signing up Oliver White and doing a few education courses and then trying to make it happen is not going to make it successful. We need to manage this with a formal change management process. So what I want to talk to you today about are the five typical failure modes that we see in clients that are trying to implement integrated business planning. So failure to face reality. I'll go into each of these in more detail in the rest of the presentation. But an organization that doesn't face the brutal reality of their current situation and hides from it is not going to get the most out of integrated business planning. An over-reliance on past success, where we've always done it this way and it worked before, is often something an organization needs to let go of and have a different way of viewing the future compared to the past. Failure to make the right decisions, or sometimes even to make decisions at all, is a common failure mode. Failure to make change happen. So this is the change management aspect of driving from your current state to your future state. And failure to make the change stick. Sadly, many organizations get to the finish line and then slide backwards slowly into the old ways of working. So you may recognize some of these. I'm going to take them one at a time, and I'll try and make it a bit more fun. So failure to face reality. This is when an organization fails to face the brutal truth of their current reality. They have a strategy, they doggedly pursue the strategy without any recognition of the current reality. And we call this one the Stockdale paradox, and that is named after Jim Stockdale, who was a high-ranking officer in the U.S. military during the Vietnam War. He was captured and in a prisoner of war camp for 8 years. And as the highest-ranking officer in the camp, he was responsible for morale of his men. And by the end of the 8 years, there was a recognition that the survival rate of the men in his camp was much higher than many of the other camps in prisoner of war camps in Vietnam. So various business schools did a study on this, and Jim Stockdale made the rest of his career writing books about it and doing talks, and ended up running as a vice presidential candidate in the US election. But when they asked him why his camp had a higher survival rate, and he said, that's easy. The optimists died first. And these were the guys that were, we'll all be home for Christmas. Christmas came and went, and we'll all be home for Easter, and we'll all be home for Thanksgiving. They failed to face their current reality, and that led to their demise. And the same is true for businesses. And it's a paradox, because you need to simultaneously believe in your strategy, but also believe in your current reality. And in doing that, it exposes the gap between the two and allows you to address that gap. So how to overcome it? Well, the executive team need to create a culture of wanting to hear the truth, because oftentimes we meet organizations where the bottom-up integrated business plan each month miraculously exactly equals the top-down strategy. And that's because people are hiding the truth. And often root cause of why people will hide the truth is because probably many years ago, the first person that came out and told the executive team the truth got shot. And everybody since then has learned the right thing to do is tell the executives what they want to hear rather than tell them the truth. So it's the responsibility of the executive team to create this culture of allowing the truth to emerge. And when you do that, you'll get much more out of your integrated business planning process. You also need to have metrics in place that are detecting bias. So if you do have a culture in the organization of over-promising or being too optimistic in your plans, there'll be metrics in place that are measuring the actuals against the plan and detecting where you have that bias. Now, bias is much more important than accuracy. You can accommodate for accuracy and try and drive plans that are more and more accurate going forward. But where you have bias, that will lead to a lack of trust, second guessing, and a much more functionally siloed organization. So we need to remove that bias. So failure to face reality, a common failure mode in integrated business planning implementations, and here's how to overcome it. Let me take the second one, an over-reliance on past success. So this is when an organization embarks upon a course of action that is entirely based on its history, with little consideration of assumptions they need to be making about the future. And a classic example of this is Tesco. We call this the Icarus paradox, because you got so good at doing something, eventually that is the thing that became your demise, like Icarus that flew too close to the sun and his wings melted and he fell into the sea and drowned. So let me come back to the Tesco example. Hugely successful in the UK. The business model was supermarkets for people that want to buy in bulk, Tesco Metro for those folks that want to grab a food to go on the way home, and Tesco Express for people that have run out of milk and need to pop to the shop and stock up their refrigerator. Perfect for the UK market. When Tesco decided to break into the US market, they picked up this model, took it to the US, and tried to implement it as is. It's been so successful in the UK. Why shouldn't it work in the US after all? 5 years later and £2 billion later, Tesco pulled out of the US as a complete failure. And the reason for this is that they had failed to recognize that the US market does not shop that way. They failed to make assumptions about what is different in the US compared to the UK. And by not doing that, they failed to address the scenarios that they needed to in order to be successful in the US. So how to overcome it? We encourage organizations to develop assumptions about the future, not based on what's happened in the past, but the assumptions Tesco should have made would have been about assumptions about the US consumer, and they didn't do that. To take those assumptions and to develop scenarios around what possible futures could be out there, and how we're going to make one of them happen, and to use integrated business planning as the vehicle for discussing and debating those assumptions, debating the scenarios, making decisions classically about delivering those scenarios, and use integrated business planning to do that. But start with your assumptions is key. So over-reliance on past success is another one of the key failure modes for implementing integrated business planning. And here is how to overcome it. So the third one on the list, and sticking with paradoxes, I've called this one the Abilene paradox. So this essentially is groupthink. When a group of individuals arrives at a decision that no one in the group supported, but the group itself got behind it. So the Abilene paradox is about a family. Picture the scene on the porch in the front of their house in a town called Abilene in the US. It's a blisteringly hot day, and one of the members of the family suggests, wouldn't it be nice if we could all have ice cream? And yes, they all agree that would be a great idea. The second member of the family gets up and goes into the kitchen and comes back with the sad news that there is no ice cream. And a third member of the family then suggests that the whole family pile into the car with no air conditioning and drive 40 miles in blistering heat to go to Abilene so that they can each have an ice cream. The whole family agrees to this, but no one single member of the family thought that it was a good idea. So how do we overcome this? Well, again, we use integrated business planning to drive cross-functional decision making. We get away from functionally based decisions, and we make the decision making process, whether it's portfolio decisions or demand decisions or supply decisions, they are made cross-functionally within the integrated business planning process. And where the cross-functional teams cannot make those decisions, there's an escalation process through the integrated business planning matrix till eventually it gets to a level where a decision can be made. So cross-functional decision making and using integrated business planning for making those decisions and empowering groups of individuals with authority to take decisions at a lower level is a key to integrated business planning. And with failure mode being failure to make the right decisions being one of the failure modes, here's how to overcome it. So I moved on to the next one on the list. I had a lack of change management. So here's an organization that has many change projects all going on at the same time. many initiatives, initiativitis it's often called. And whereas each of those change projects is being managed individually, this is when an organization fails to see the big picture and to manage it as a whole, and to recognize the amount of change that is going on, and to deal with that in a formal change management process. How to overcome it? From Oliver White's experience over the past 50 years in dealing with clients, we've developed our own change management methodology that many of you may recognize as the proven path shown here on the slide. Now, the first part of the proven path is the lead phase, and we cannot miss out any of these steps along the way with any change management program. In the lead phase, we want to ensure that the executive team is bought into the change. They understand the issues that we're trying to solve. They understand the value at stake. They understand the resources that it's going to consume, the timing, and they have a common view of the roadmap. And then at that point, and only at that point, do they buy into and commit to the change happening. So then we move from there into the second phase of the change, which is the transform phase. Now, in this phase, it's a process of creating a body of change agents, and within that body of change agents, we can transfer knowledge, so that this group of people has a body of knowledge about how to run the business and how to make change happen. And this could be an integrated business planning project, but it equally applies to any change initiative. So we, once the knowledge has been transferred to that group of change agents, we use that group of change agents to design the new ways of working for the business. Using that new knowledge and facilitated by Oliver White, we get to a point where we have fully designed the new ways of working, and we have the executive team bought into and committed to making that change happen. We then move into the third phase, which is the ownership phase of the change. And in this phase, we insist the broader organization has given some education, but not by Oliver White. They need to hear the message from their own leaders. And so this new knowledge and new ways of working is cascaded to the organization, and they're hearing the message from their own people. And that's a very powerful way of building a consensus and building momentum around the change. Of course, Oliver White continues to provide coaching and guidance and facilitation through this stage. But if I mapped out the Oliver White's level of involvement, during the first phase, Oliver White is taking the lead. During the transform phase, we're working side by side. And during the ownership phase, the organization now owns the new way of working. And Oliver White is following along, providing guidance where it's needed. So failure to make change happen, here's our approach to overcoming it. And finally, the lack of sustainability measures that results in the change not sticking. And sadly, many organizations get to the finish line, they've finished the project, they disband the project team, the change agents go back into their normal day jobs, and slowly the organization slides back into the old ways of working. It happens more often than we care than we like. Now, how to overcome it? Well, you've planned the change, you've made the change happen, that's your plan do, and then organizations give up on the check and act, the plan, do, check, act. So the check is to have sustainability metrics in place, to say, we planned this change, we've done it, and we're going to use these metrics to determine whether it's still in place and it has the same level of maturity that we'd intended. And this could be simple meeting effectiveness scorecards. It could be that we put onto the executive dashboard some metrics around the sustainability of this change that we've just implemented. It could be that we have an annual audit that ensures that the change is still in place and we have a refresher and move forward where needed. So failure to make change stick, having sustainability measures in place to ensure that it sticks is how to overcome it. So this is going to be my last slide, then I'm going to open up for some questions. So we will have time at the end. Making change happen is difficult, and oftentimes we find organizations are doing multiple change initiatives in an ad hoc way rather than following a logical sequence of events and initiatives. And so this jigsaw puzzle here gives us a clue. You start the jigsaw puzzle with the corners. So we encourage organizations to develop a culture of one set of numbers, standard processes that everybody follows. There's clear accountability in the business and ownership. Each individual owns their piece of the business and drives improvement for the piece of the business that they own. We encourage a culture of keeping to plans across the business. So I did what I said I was going to do. And if you've got these four corners in place, you're in a position to then start looking at the more Six Sigma type change levers or the more advanced cross-functional self-managed teams or a knowledge-based automation. But if you try and embark upon these other things first without having the corners in place, you're going to be heading for another failure. So that's part of what makes it difficult. And then on the right-hand side, the famous three circles that many of you will have seen and we speak about a lot is people and behaviors, processes and tools. And many organizations that we meet are stuck in the circle of tools, spending a lot of money trying to find the right tool to run the business and finding it very, very difficult and very, very expensive. And our guidance is always to start with the people. Start with education. Transfer that knowledge to the people. Make sure they have a good understanding of the why behind a lot of the business processes that we need to design. And then use those people to redesign and optimize your business processes and to make them applicable to your business. And when you do that, you often find that the tool that you have today already is actually working. Many organizations start a conversation with us saying our tool is broken. And I often think if a tool could talk, it may say something like, well, you broke me. It's something that people do to manipulate the way tools are designed. It's not necessarily the way the tool, if you have the right processes and the right people, usually the tool works just fine. But if you're looking to upgrade the tools that you're using, make sure you're doing it from a position of knowledge and from a position where you have the right business processes.
Hey, Gary.
So that's all from me for today. I hope it's been helpful. Are there any questions?
Thank you, Gary. Again, great job, and can't stress more what you're saying there, where, again, people and processes always need to come before tools. As I mentioned, I always find that as a catalyst. Because of tight time, we're going to do two questions. I would ask Gary, keep them very brief. We're already into the next session because unfortunately we started yours a little bit late. So if we can keep this condensed version. The first one coming from online. The question is, I need my sales force. This is what's he's hearing from the sales force. Need to overstretch my sales plan to motivate our sales team to more and end up not in a comfort zone. So they're stretching them. How would you see it fit the lack of bias concept? How would you approach, or how would Oliver White approach this? Obviously, doing this and coaching people on these kind of practices that don't add a lot of value sometimes to the process.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll keep it really to the point. We have to be putting forward plans that we believe we are going to ultimately deliver. Putting forward a stretch plan is not the way to try and improve the baseline. We need to do that by using opportunities. So what I could do is, if I'm trying to stretch the plan, I believe I can sell 100. Then I put forward a plan that says 100. But I put on top of that an opportunity I have to sell an extra 20 that is not certain yet, but I think is worth discussing and investing in order to try and stretch beyond 100. That's the way to do it. The way to not do it is to put forward a plan of 120 and hope for the best.
Yep, and I agree. Exactly what Gary's saying. Show the consequences of that, especially to the other make sure that person understands. But the cross-functional team, in today's environment with the pandemic, how many times do we have limited resources? They're shared across other families, and that consequence can put something else or excess inventory and not the right mix of products. So doing that can have downstream negative ramifications for themselves that they're not always realizing because they don't know that entire process. What about a question from the room? One quick question from the room. Okay, I'm not seeing a hand up, so we're going to transition to the next person.
Okay.
Gary, appreciate the time.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye.